The race for the White House has been thrown into turmoil after the revelation that Donald Trump and his wife Melania have both tested positive for coronavirus. The couple are self-isolating at the White House. Officials say Mr. Trump has mild symptoms but is in good spirits. His diagnosis has stunned America, causing financial markets to dip and raises major questions about the remainder of the election campaign. Well, with the very latest, our North America editor Jon Sopel is at the White House for us tonight. Jon.
Clive, if this doesn't sound contradictory, the news that broke at 1 o'clock this morning was simultaneously astonishing and mind-boggling and not in the least bit surprising. Astonishing and mind-boggling because Donald Trump is the most protected man in the world. He is tested daily for the coronavirus. Not at all surprising, given the very lackadaisical attitude towards face masks that you see in the White House, although palpably it was a different atmosphere today.
As you know, tonight's Al Smith dinner.
Last night, in what now appears to be grim irony, the president made a speech from the White House about the pandemic. The worst was behind us, he said.
And I just want to say that the end of the pandemic is in sight, and next year will be one of the greatest years in the history of our country.
But then later that evening came a bombshell statement that will reverberate around the world. The most serious health issue to affect a serving president in decades. He tweeted, "Tonight, the First Lady and I tested positive for COVID-19. We'll begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We'll get through this together." Today, the President's Chief of Staff gave reporters this update.
The President and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19. They remain in good spirits. The President does have mild symptoms.
A hint of something being wrong came earlier in the evening last night when it was announced that this woman, Hope Hicks, had contracted the virus. On Wednesday, she was part of the inner circle to travel with the president on the cramped Marine One helicopter. None of them is wearing a mask. As Donald Trump seemed to dance with joy at the rally in Duluth, Minnesota, she'd become symptomatic and was quarantined on Air Force One for the return journey to Washington. The ripples of concern will reach everyone who's been in close contact with the president, not least Joe Biden, who shared a debate stage with him for a shouty 90 minutes on Tuesday night. A debate where the president ripped into the Democratic candidate for his mask wearing.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
And it was noticeable that none of the Trump entourage wore face coverings.
That actually violated the rules of the Cleveland Clinic, which was in charge of all the safety issues inside the hall, which were that everybody except for the president, the vice president, and I were not supposed to wear masks. I mean, we're supposed to wear masks.
The president has worn masks in public on less than a handful of occasions, and his ambivalence towards them is evident.
Can you take it off because I cannot hear you?
I'll just speak louder, sir.
Oh, okay, good. You want to be politically correct. Well, I just don't want to wear one myself. It's a recommendation. They recommend it. I'm feeling good.
And he's been holding rallies as though COVID was in the rearview mirror, with thousands turning up, no attempts at social distancing, few wearing masks. Today, messages of support from around the world. This from Boris Johnson, who's been where the president is now.
Obviously, I think we all want to send our best wishes to the president and the First Lady, and I've done that this morning, as you can imagine. And I'm sure that they'll both stage a very strong recovery.
And messages of support too from political rivals. This from Joe Biden, who's tested negative today.
Sending my prayers for the health and safety of the First Lady and President of the United States after they tested positive for COVID-19. My wife Jill and I prayed that they'll make a quick and full recovery. This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously.
But another leading Democrat, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, comes very close to saying to the president, "Serves you right."
This is tragic. It's very sad. But it also is something that going into crowds, unmasked and all the rest, was sort of a brazen invitation for something like this to happen.
This is first and foremost a medical issue for the president and his wife, but it's upended a presidential election campaign that needed no further agitation, with many questions begged and few answers to give at this early stage. Jon Sopel, BBC News at the White House.
Well, with a month to go before the presidential election, what impact could Donald Trump's illness have at the ballot box? Our North America correspondent Nick Bryant reports now from Michigan.
The lockdown is a scam! The COVID tests are a scam!
The coronavirus has opened up yet another fault line in an already fractured country. These militiamen, part of a protest of those who see the COVID restrictions as a threat to American liberty. It was packed with supporters of Donald Trump, most of them still not wearing masks, and began with heads bowed in prayer for the president.
If we could take like 5 seconds just to say a prayer for the guy, that's okay? Lord, we pray for President Trump, his family, for a swift recovery.
And I understand he's got some mild symptoms, but I think he'll probably be over them soon, and it'll be a victory for him.
A victory in what way?
A victory in showing that there's a lot of overreaction to this COVID stuff.
I just hope he pulls through it.
Do you think he took enough precautions? Do you think he should have worn a mask?
No. I think everybody, this is a free country, and everybody should not be dictated to, and everybody shouldn't have to wear a mask if they don't want to.
This was another COVID protest of childcare workers bemoaning the lack of financial aid. And their responses to the overnight news spoke of how in American democracy right now, there's not even an agreed-upon set of facts.
I don't believe it.
Why don't you believe it?
I think it's just a ploy because he did so bad debating. He did horrible in the debates. So I think it's a ploy to get out of debating again. And if he does have it, I don't believe it. I can't even say if he does have it. I just don't believe it.
Michigan is a key battleground state that Donald Trump won unexpectedly in 2016. But there aren't so many Trump yard signs as there were 4 years ago.
We've fallen flat on our face.
Jack Spielman is a lifelong Republican who supported him back then. But he's already voted for Joe Biden, partly because of the president's mishandling of COVID.
He initially denied it, called it fake news, blamed it on the Democrats, blamed it on the Chinese. Then he transitioned and said it's going to go away like magic. Then it was going to go away when the heat comes. Then we just had to deal with it. And then we're going to have a vaccine just before the election. You can't trust anything he says with it.
In a bygone political age, the nation might have rallied behind a leader suffering from a virus that had killed so many of his compatriots. But this is such a deeply divided America, and this is such a deeply divisive American president. Even this pandemic has become an accelerant of political polarization. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Michigan.
It's well known that the older you are and the heavier you are, the higher the risk of having serious complications with COVID-19. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh looks at the risk to the president's health.
Donald Trump has several factors which raise his risk profile for coronavirus: his age, weight, and being a man. At 74, he's often insisted how healthy he is, despite a love of burgers and hot dogs. Age is the biggest risk factor for COVID-19. In the United States, 8 out of 10 deaths have been among the over 65s. The risk of dying for someone aged 65 to 74 is 90 times higher than for someone in their 20s. Now, to put that in context, a recent international study found that once infected with coronavirus, the chances of dying were around 1 in 100 at age 65, 1 in 25 at 75, and 1 in 7 at 85.
The President and First Lady of the United States.
The First Lady, Melania Trump, is just 50, 24 years younger than Donald Trump, and physically fit, so her risks from COVID should be low. The President is 6'3" and weighs more than 17 stone, putting him in the obese category, another red flag. His medical team will be on constant guard for any change in his condition.
Often patients have quite mild symptoms to start with, and then it's as if they drop off a cliff and suddenly it gets worse, and that can happen really within hours. I don't think they can be sure for approximately 10 days. If then he really hasn't developed any worse symptoms, he seems to be controlling the virus in his throat and his nose, then I think they will relax.
I still have a temperature, and so...
It was 9 days after testing positive for coronavirus before Boris Johnson was admitted to hospital in early April. He spent 3 nights in intensive care and says the NHS saved his life. Another leader who got COVID was President Bolsonaro of Brazil. He had few symptoms and dismissed the virus as a measly cold. It's impossible to predict how any individual will cope with COVID. Many people never develop any symptoms at all. And there are treatments now which have helped improve survival rates for what can be a brutal disease. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
And our North America editor Jon Sopel is at the White House. John, November the 3rd is election day, little more than 4 weeks away. Where does the president's illness leave the campaign?
Let me give you a bit of geography of where I'm standing to help answer the question, if I might. In front of me is the West Wing of the White House, where the Oval Office is, where the President would normally be working, except he's not now because he is in the East Wing, which is also where the residence is and where he is now convalescing. And the longer he is there, the less normal this campaign will be. Now, we've had a bit of an update of a medical bulletin that he has been given an antibody cocktail, an infusion that was completed without incident, we're told. The President is fatigued but in good spirits, and apparently the First Lady has a mild cough and headache, but otherwise not too bad. Where it leaves the politics, I mean, the next presidential debate was due to take place in 12 days' time. That seems highly unlikely. There were a whole series of rallies that the President was going to hold. They will be off. He's not going to be able to go to those, and it may be that he'll do Zoom calls if his health improves. But there's one critical thing in all of this, Clive, and it's this. Donald Trump wanted the last 4 weeks of the campaign to be about anything but COVID. Now that he's contracted coronavirus, it is going to remain absolutely centre stage.
OK, John, thank you for that. Jon Sopel there at the White House.